First of all, I would love to say hello. Choir, hello! It's so good to see y'all. And to all of you, I see so many faces and so many people that my heart has continued, even though my presence hasn't been physically here. And it's a delight to see you, and I see new faces as well. I see faces that have come from Carpinteria and from Ojai and Santa Barbara, and so my heart, and some from LA, I don't want to leave y'all out, that are here as well. I know in the 10 years it's been since I've been here, you've gone through many losses, and you've had many celebrations, and I wanted to explain and express, I keep track of you. And so I've noticed those. I've cried with some of your same tears for some of the losses you've experienced, but also celebrated when I see those moments of BPC stepping into all that she is. And so thank you. Thank you for letting me be here today. I notice I'm very dry again. Would you get me some water? Thank you. Let's start with the scripture. We have Job 12, 7 through 10. But ask of the animals, and they will teach you, and the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In God's hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of every human being. And then the second reading is Ezekiel 36. A new heart I will give you, a new spirit I will put within you. And I will remove from your body the heart of stone, thank you, and give you a heart of flesh. May God's Spirit awaken and alive us and engage us in ways to hear this text anew. Friends, I spent most of my summers growing up at this magical place that was called Notch Ranch. It was in southwest Colorado. We would go there 1 to 2 weeks a summer. And it was, where Pagosa Springs is? Does anybody know Pagosa? You know some of those back there. From Pagosa Springs, you would go further up beyond Williams Creek Reservoir. Beyond Williams Creek Reservoir, we would go way up to log cabins that were adjacent to the wilderness. And in this place, and I started going when I was 1 year old and went until I guess into my late 20s or 30s. We would go and be surrounded by the beauty of the Rockies. We would go and I would find myself standing with my feet in a pristine, clear stream of the Piedra River, and I would have the aspen quaking. It was a magical place, but it was more than just nature. Nature was a part of that, but what also included was the profound connection I felt with the wildlife that was there. So whether it was squirrels or chipmunks that would come to play, whether it was deer or elk, there were also cattle and horses and sheep in the area. There were bears. Now, I didn't get up close and personal with the bears, but I did enjoy their presence, and I found it very phenomenal because it spoke to me deeply of that love of there's something greater than I, and something that actually I'm a part of. In being there, and many times people will ask as a minister, where did you have that place that you knew of something that was yourself but larger, of divine love, we might say? I can't tell you a time or a place, but Notch Ranch was the location. That was where. For my kinship with animals was phenomenal to me, and my kinship with the natural world. But I noticed, and I often had these moments of having such a profoundly tender heart that I was the kid that would unexpectedly to me, but also very predictably for everyone else, would start crying inconsolably whenever I saw something of deep sadness. I was that kid in the movie that would watch, do you remember these, the Red Fern Grows? Do y'all remember that? I sobbed uncontrollably at that show. Or Old Yeller. Thank you. Oh. Or Bambi. Do you remember the line in Bambi? I mean, it's embraced, it's imprinted on me when Bambi is searching all over for his mother and the male stag says those infamous lines of, man, say with me, man has been in the forest today. Oh, it just would break my heart. I grew up in a place where animals were a commodity. and where roadkill was an expected collateral damage of advancement of human technology and human advancement. So I lived with this contradiction, this sharp pull of knowing my heart was so tender, and yet in a world that seemed so harsh to animals, to those I loved. We grew up with beagles in our lives, and many of you know I didn't play with dolls. I just never was a doll kid. But I play with my beagles, and I dress them up in little doll clothes. And I always think those precious souls that put up with me doing this, I put them in baby carriages, and I wheeled them all over the neighborhood. And they loved me. I knew that without a doubt. I would sit at night, if I had feelings come up, and I would go out and sit on the stairs at our home, and those beagles would come up and they would actually kiss the tears off. They'd let me feel. They invited me to feel unconditionally. I had this connection with animals that I couldn't quite explain, and yet I knew I wanted more. I watched shows like Jacques Cousteau and Flipper, and I dreamed of swimming in the oceans with these mammals that were amazing to me. In second grade, I told my teacher I wanted to be a marine biologist, not because I had any interest in science. I just wanted to swim in the waters with the dolphins and the whales. I watched shows like Daktari. Who remembers Daktari? There's a few of you. I'm glad I'm not the oldest person here. And do y'all remember what the lion's name was? Clarence, the cross-eyed lion. And I knew enough to know that Clarence was never really a reality. I would not be walking with Clarence by my side, although I did get to walk with lions in the wild. But to see a lion in its own sanctuary, in its own habitat, to me made my heart come alive. And what I noticed was my heart started to break, and I noticed I had these moments of feeling such deep pain when I would see the suffering that was caused by animals. And so I was taught, and then I started adapting that to myself, where I started layering over and over my tender heart. That's the way the world is. That's how nature is. This is who we are as humans. This is our role on this planet. And that layering eventually created what Ezekiel's talking about, is that hardness, that protection. In the vulnerable place of my heart, I was layering so much to keep from feeling the pain. I would say that's probably true of myself. A part of me went to sleep or didn't feel so much until I hit my 30s and was in seminary. And let me see if I can get this right. And I found this quote by C.S. Lewis. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it up carefully, round it with hobbies, with luxuries, avoid all entanglements, lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. I think I'm supposed to be advancing this, and I'm not. Okay, great. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless place, know that your heart will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. For to love is to be vulnerable. That spoke to me in ways that I couldn't understand fully, and I knew I would carry that with me for many years as I integrated that into my life. Of the ways in which how we're invited in that Ezekiel text not to let our hearts be hardened, but to let them be fleshy. That's the word that's used, to let them be open, to actually embrace our tender-heartedness. As I shared 5 years ago, I traveled on this sabbatical, and it was an amazing journey for me. Before I left, I made a real clear commitment. I realized to experience the animals, the love, the joy, the delight that I had with them, invited me to open myself up to the pain and the suffering and the sadness. I knew when we went on safari, it wasn't going to be a Disney safari. We would see elephants, we would see lions eating antelope. But it's an invitation of feeling both the pain and the suffering, the sadness, that I also could figure and experience the joy and the aliveness. And so I opened my heart wide and went on this journey. A friend of mine, Gretchen, said very clearly, she said, while we were with each of the animals, she said, "You've come alive in ways that I've never seen you before." She said, "You are radiant. You express that love that comes through you in your connection with animals. And that to me has been something that I've continued over the rest of my life, and that to me is my invitation for me to step into. You've asked me very graciously this morning to share about women who have inspired me. And it's a daunting task because there have been so many. But I want to focus on two this morning. One is actually here today, and she's a dear mentor and she's a dear friend. But Dr. Kathleen Hendricks, Katie, is here from Ojai. Katie has, for me, invited me over and over. She has seen my love, my tenderheartedness, as my genius, as my gift, as what I have to offer the world. So where I've seen so many times over and over, when I feel the pain and the sadness that there was something wrong, she's actually invited me to feel more, that that's what I have to offer. And so my deep, deep love and appreciation to you, Katie, for ways you have inspired me and continue to. Another woman that I want to introduce you to is one that we went to when we visited Kenya, and that's Dr. Dame Daphne Sheldrick. She was born in Kenya and indeed continued on in her work and research with elephants. She is one who kept her heart open. She did not let it be broken. And she learned from the elephants. So she integrated those two texts that we talked about. The one of Job, and I want to spend just a few minutes talking about that text from Job. Because if you think about it, Job has gone through the worst of the worst. Job has gone through more suffering than anyone we can imagine. He's had more loss. He's had more betrayals. He's had more disappointments and more abandonment. And these words of Job's are from Job. It's in his own wisdom that he sinks down in what we might call a dark night of the soul, or it could be an awakening. And he says, ask the animals, ask the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, for they will teach you. Dame Daphne knew this through her experiences. And as you see, this is one of her elephants that she worked many years for. She was born in the Rift Valley. She grew up in Kenya. She knew the world of elephants and also of the wild. And she saw how many times the elephants and the life of the wild of living in Africa. She saw the circle of life. But what she started to see was a radical shift of the human interaction, and mostly that was destruction that was starting to happen because of humanity's demands on the species. She was married, and her husband, David, and they were wardens of the Tsavo National Park. She rescued many, many animals over the time of her life. Water buffaloes, dik-diks, rhinos, bongos. And after David died, she moved back to Nairobi, in which she had bought a house on the edge of the Nairobi National Park and started reaching out and caring for little orphans at that time. She was reached out by the Nairobi Park. That's Aisha. She was reached out by the Nairobi Park where they had found two baby elephants that they found with their mother that had been poached. One was male and one was female. They were trying to nurse off their mother. And they reached out to her and said, will you care for these babies? And baby elephants, the care of them is not something that just happens overnight. In fact, it requires a lot of commitment. For every 3 hours, day and night, it's feeding them and nursing them with a certain type of formula. So Dame Daphne would travel across Nairobi Park, and some of us have been there. She would travel all the way across, and in those moments, to feed them day and night for 3 hours. The male died quickly, but Aisha, the female, stayed alive. When the male died, she told the park, she said, I want to bring them back to my house, Aisha. First of all, it's just easier because she's at my house. And so for 6 months, she fed her and nurtured her and loved her. Sadly, when she thought Aisha was healthy and she could take a break, she went to her daughter's wedding for a weekend, and while she was gone, Aisha died. Dame Daphne was heartbroken, and she didn't know what to do. She had doctors evaluate Aisha, and the only thing they could figure out was there was nothing physically wrong with the baby elephant, but she died of a broken heart. Indeed, this was one of the biggest choices of Dame Daphne's life, was to recognize if she's going to close her heart off, because to love these elephants meant opening her heart up to full exposure, or indeed would she do something about it. So she dedicated her life to rescuing elephants. She opened her house up, and it became one of the refuge centers of the world. And so, I think, so you'll see some slides of her. Dame Daphne became the only woman on this planet who knows how to nurse a baby elephant from infancy through the full 3 years that it requires with a certain formula, that Similac and coconut milk, that keeps them alive and they're able to release them into the wild. She created the nursery on her house's edge and created a team of keepers. And there were enough that would rotate through, so no baby was ever left alone for 3 years. They even had the keepers sleep with babies, with a mattress at first so the babies could reach out with their trunk and they could touch to know you're still here. Eventually they go to a platform, but again the babies will reach up in the middle of the night to know you're still here. She was asked, how do you do this? Because many die. Many don't survive. And she said it's the biggest heartbreak. For to love a baby elephant means opening your heart up for 3 years and giving it every ounce of love, of nurturance, of care. And so it means when they die, your heart breaks. And Dame Daphne said over and over, what I do is I cry buckets and buckets of tears. I let myself fully express all the sadness and grief. For then I know my love for them has been that deep. And then the energy that comes in expressing those emotions, the joy in loving them, helps me move forward. She said, I've learned from the elephants, and if you think about them, so many of them have gone through trauma. They've gone through seeing their parents killed or they themselves have been injured, and yet they trust. They reach out and trust humans one more time to try to survive. To date, she's raised over 140 infant African elephants, and 69 are living in the wild. She has made that much of a transition. She talks about how highly intelligent they are. They're perceptive, their communication skills, their nurturing and care, and they teach us about love. They ask for help. Many times some of the older elephants that she's rescued come back to Tsavo with an injured part and actually asked to come in to be healed, to then be re-released. This is Dr. Dame Daphne Sheldrick, with one of her elephants that's still alive today and has grown to full completion. She's won many honorary awards, and in 2006 she was appointed by Queen Elizabeth as the Dame Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. It was the first knighthood since Kenya won its independence in 1963. Obviously this movie, Born to be Wild, with Samuel Jackson, she shares her story. But again, Dame Daphne has inspired me and inspired my heart in my work with animals. Friends, I believe with all my heart, our connection with animals matters. Our opening our hearts up with them is a huge game changer in this world. I believe as we continue to face conflict and violence and terrorism and fear and all that unfolds, I believe animals are a difference it makes, because as we open our hearts up to them, and whether it's opening up to the fact that they may die at some point, which breaks our hearts. I know some of you actually shared with me you've lost a dear one. If it means opening your hearts up, and I love this, I hadn't remembered it, but Sharon reminded me. Do you remember when we commissioned all those puppy dogs to go serve and care for people? That was an amazing time, because they reached out and they loved each and every person they went and called on. Those ways remind us to love. I think sometimes it's hard. We see an animal that's hurt or injured, and if it's Africa, or if it's someone that we see a cat or a dog on the street in Brentwood, or if it's our own that we've loved dearly and we let go of, and we have that fear of, I can't open myself up again because it hurts too much. My invitation is let those feelings come through. Feel and express, and then choose to open your heart again and again. For it's in those moments that we do expand our love. And by expanding our love, we expand love into this world and we change it. So open your eyes and see. Open your heart. Feel, express. Be open to learning, to seeing them as teachers. For love is contagious. And as I love that animal, all of a sudden my love can expand to the next round of people and then to the next. And think about what a difference this world would be if we all embrace that tenderheartedness in all of us. For isn't that what divine love calls us to? Is to love and then love again. Amen.